Hey, everybody. Today's guest embodies what it means to believe in yourself when very few others do. Anthony Robles was born with one leg, but instead of seeing that as a limitation, it became a strength, especially when it comes to the sport of wrestling. Thanks to a mom that taught him resilience from an early age, Anthony turned that belief into an NCAA championship, a best selling book, and a major motion picture called Unstoppable. Today, we talk about the many crossroads he faced along the way, how he thought about giving up many, many times, and how letters from a group of third graders gave him the encouragement to keep going. Anthony is an inspiration to many, and I can't recommend his book and his movie enough. This is not a story about wrestling, it's a story about faith, perseverance, and believing in yourself against all odds. I'm grateful for our time today with Anthony Robles. We can rock and roll. So I want to ask you about the sport of wrestling first of all, because I'm a hack of a high school wrestler. Didn't wrestle in college like you, of course, but I love the sport. I loved what it gave me, and I want to hear from you. What is so great about wrestling? Because I don't think it gets enough attention unless people actually did it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I love about wrestling, it's that one-on-one aspect of it. There's so many lessons that you can take away from that, just being on the mat by yourself because, you know, there's no timeouts, right? No one can save you. If you're getting beat, you're getting beat and you got to deal with it. And if you're wrestling someone who's stronger than you, who's more experienced, you got to figure it out. And so I felt like in a lot of ways, wrestling was very applicable to what I was dealing with in my life anyway. I was born missing my leg. There was nobody that could step in and take care of me and feel sorry for me. I had to figure things out. So I love that the sport, it basically gave me a platform to really showcase what my abilities were. Because growing up, my mom always told me, you focus on your strengths, you focus on what you're capable of. And that's what wrestling taught me as well. Go out there, battle the person that's in front of you and find a way to win. And I just love that about the sport, just finding your natural abilities and making the most of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about grit. I mean, your story is all about grit. And the thing is too, it's a team sport, but also an individual sport, and so is cross country. And that's another, running's another favorite of mine. And so what did it feel like for you when you found wrestling? Because I believe it was basically at going into your freshman year of high school is when it really when you found the sport.
Yeah, I did. Actually, what happened, I was born in California, Southern California. And I just remember right before I started my freshman year of high school, uh, my family said, we're going to move to Arizona. And so, I basically went kicking and screaming, but, it ended up being the best thing that happened to me because we moved to Mesa. And while our house was still getting ready for us, we were staying in Tucson for a little while. And my cousin was a wrestler. He was 3 years older than me. He was in high school at the time. And so, when I was living in California, we would talk all the time. He'd say, hey, I think you should try wrestling. He's like, you're small, but you're strong. Wrestling would be the perfect fit for you. And I always kind of shrugged it off. It wasn't really something that caught my interest. But that summer with my cousin hanging out, one day I just remember him taking me to practice. And, I'm watching the guys from the side and he convinced me to try it. And I just remember going out there and getting thrown around that wrestling room, but just falling in love with the sport, just falling in love with how tough it was. And, I had an uphill battle, but luckily with, like you mentioned, it's an individual sport, but it's a team aspect as well. Luckily, I was placed in a situation to where I had an amazing team around me. I had to earn their respect. I had to earn their trust, but, they gave me that opportunity and I had a great coach who was willing to figure out a style that would work for me specifically.
So before that, before you found that, what was? And I know the movie covers it a little bit. It's more about high school on, and in your book, you definitely cover your upbringing. But for people that haven't read your book, what was your childhood like? I mean, all you knew was having one leg, but to the outside world, it was different. So were you constantly trying sports, and your mom throwing you into things?
I was really just trying to find my place. I was trying to find something that was my opportunity to be successful and my opportunity to show people what I was capable of. Because being born missing my leg, immediately everyone wanted to focus on what I didn't have, what I couldn't do. So I felt like sports was a great route for me to find a sense of belonging. And I love tackle football. I played football from sixth grade through ninth grade, and it was really just me looking for something. My mom always encouraged me to try things, but she was never one to force me into sports or anything like that. It was just something that was natural for me. But once wrestling became part of my life, it consumed me. All the other sports just kind of went away, and I think it just went back to my natural abilities. I was like 90 pounds as a 14-year-old kid,
Mhm.
so football. After that season, it was like, okay, this isn't going to be, necessarily something that's going to be easy for me to find success because I was smaller.
Mhm.
But uh, wrestling became that avenue, and I was just grateful for that to be able to show what I was capable.
So we talk about pay your dues, the struggle before success. That's a lot about what we talk on this podcast. So I'd love to focus on that because it your story didn't happen overnight. Even when you found wrestling and that was clearly the sport for you, it wasn't easy early on. What was that freshman year like? I believe you finished last in the city tournament or something like that.
Yeah, my freshman year was difficult, to say the least. It was a couple different challenges. I mentioned being lighter, so I weighed 90 pounds. I was wrestling the 103-pound weight class, so I was undersized. And also, I found that, I couldn't learn how to do the moves the exact same way as my teammates. And so that first year, my coach was trying to figure out how to teach me, how to adjust, how to maneuver, and how to be creative. And so, yeah, that first year, it was a lot of losses. I did. Uh, End up finishing last place in the city tournament that freshman season. And that was upsetting, because coming into that season, I was excited. I had all these high expectations and, to not see those results, even though I was putting in the effort, I was putting in the work, I was showing up every day. That was heartbreaking for me, and I really contemplated quitting after that final tournament of the year. But, I just remember one night just sitting in my room and, just making the decision. I said, you know what? I'm going to make this work. I'm going to find a way to be successful. I'm not going to stop training until I am the best wrestler to ever come out of Arizona. It was a passion of mine. This was a sport that I wanted to do well in, and I believed I could. I just needed to figure out the answers. And, from there on out, it was just no looking back. It's like, okay, I'm going to figure out, where are my challenges? I'm going to find a way to plug those holes. I'm going to find a way to maneuver and make this something that I can be successful in. It was an uphill battle, but it was worth it. And I think that's the thing about sports, but also wrestling specifically is, it exposes certain things, it exposes weaknesses. But, as you're going through, if you have the courage and you're willing to address those weaknesses, that's how you become stronger and level up, and that's a great lesson for life as well. You're going to fall short sometimes. You're going to get knocked down, but learn something from that, come back a little bit stronger, come back with a little bit different strategy, and you'll be able to overcome what's in front of you. And so little by little, we were able to do that. And little by little, we started to find those puzzle pieces.
Yeah. You said that applies to life too, right? It's not just sport, it's life, it's business, it's parenting, it's all these things. That resolve though, at 14 years old, you had that resolve. I mean, do you think about your life? If you had given up on that, I'm sure with your mentality, you would have gone on to do plenty of great things. But the impact you've had because you chose to stay in it at that point, and there's steps along the way where you chose to stay in it, and it sounds like that resolve, it was ingrained in you to stick it out.
I definitely think on occasionally what my life would be like had I quit, because wrestling's it's blessed me with so many opportunities. It's made me who I am just mentally, and I'm just grateful for that. And, there were times, plenty of times where I did want to quit, when I did just think about just walking out that door and not coming back. But, there were a couple things that kind of motivated me to stay on track along the way. One thing I would focus on was just that end goal. Of course, it's just like, how good is it going to feel to reach that? But also, in the back of my head, I learned that sometimes you got to use negativity as motivation too. It's like sometimes it's not going to be, all bright and all fun and all happy in front of you that can motivate you. Sometimes there's going to be some negative things out there. And for me, it was the doubt of people. For me, it was people seeing me as less than and feeling sorry for me. And that was an inner rage I had to deal with. But in my head, I was thinking, what, if I quit now, I'm proving a lot of people right.
Mhm.
I'm living up to these expectations. So I learned to use that as fuel. And then also another thing that helped me was, uh, celebrating the little victories along the way. I think that's often overlooked. It's like, we focus only on the end goal that we're chasing after when, in reality, we got to focus on the process, just celebrate those little steps that you're taking along the way. It goes back to wrestling. A wrestling match, it's broken up at 7 minutes, broken up into three periods. There's a lot that can happen, and the way I was coached and taught is you don't focus on the end outcome. You don't focus on winning at the end. You focus on the positions along the way. And life and every goal is the same thing. Focus on the little things that you can do every single day and celebrate those things along the way that as you check them off. And the more you do that, the more you see the progress behind you that you're making. And that's what helped me.
Yeah, helped you through those, I like to think about crossroads we come to in life, right? And that was certainly one for you. Another one was kind of at the end of high school, right? You finish undefeated your junior and senior year, so you figured it out. You turned it around and you had one D1 offer from Drexel. You chose to not pursue that and walk on at Arizona State. That's another major crossroads. You had a decision to make there, and your life could have gone a couple of different ways, but you chose probably the harder path, right? The more uncertain path. What was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, that was a difficult decision that I stressed over many nights. And, you know, with that full ride offer from Drexel, I was so honored to get that offer, to receive that. I love the coach there. The team was amazing. I remember taking the trip out and the facilities were awesome. But, for me, ultimately, the decision to stay home and take that risk was because I felt like I needed to stay close to my family, specifically my mom, my three little brothers, and my little sister. We were going through some bumpy times, and as people read deeper into my story, I didn't have the best father figure. I've never met my biological father. My former stepfather was abusive in some ways, and someone that my family could not count on. And so I didn't want to leave and go across country and leave them behind to deal with that on their own.
Mhm.
And that's why I made the decision to stay. And it was scary. I felt like I was giving up a lot, but at the same time, it was worth it. To be around my family to support them, and it was also pretty neat because along the way, I realized that uh, I need their support as well. We were leaning on each other along that journey. So giving up that scholarship for me, for my family, it ended up being the best decision for me, because I needed their strength, I needed their energy as we were pushing through our fight and going through life together. I think that's one of the things as well as in life. It's like, if you have a passion for something, if you feel like a strong calling, go for it. There's going to be people that think you're crazy. There's going to be people that say you can't do it. It's wrong. But if you feel it in your heart and if you have the drive for it, go after that. Trust yourself and just go all in.
Yeah, yeah, that was a selfless act for your family. That certainly worked out for you. And we haven't talked about your mom enough, and she's definitely featured in the movie. Jennifer Lopez plays your mom, so that's cool. But your mom, you talk about it in your book. I mean, what an anchor for you along the way from the get go. I mean, not just when you were struggling about wrestling, just the feels like God was setting her up, to guide you in these places along the way.
Absolutely. And I love how you said that. God definitely had a plan for my family and for my mom. And my mom, she wrestled her own challenges through life. I mean, she had me at a young age. She's a single parent. And like I mentioned, that my former stepfather was always in and out. So she was going through her battles. And, for me, that was something that I was inspired by just seeing her on a daily basis. Like I'm going to school, I'm wrestling, all these things, but my mom is trying to manage a family. My mom is trying to budget and struggle. I mean, she was, selling her blood once a week just to put food on the table at a certain point in our lives. And, she was one that every single time I would go to her and say, "Mom, I'm going to quit wrestling. I'm going to help the family out more." She refused it. She wouldn't allow me to do that. She said, "The best thing you can do for me is, continue that education and chase your dream." And just an amazing mother, an amazing role model for me to look up to. It was her high expectations, of herself. It was a no excuse mentality of herself, and she imparted that on her kids, and me especially. So, my mom not only talked the talk, but she walked the walk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that resolve that we were talking about earlier, right? She was modeling that for you. I mean, all along your childhood. So when you walk onto the Arizona State team, I mean, I think like a room like that, probably every kid there's a state champion, right, or close to it. I mean, just like you. What was it like, coming into that environment? And again, they're looking at you, maybe they knew you because you were from Arizona too, but What was it like going into that environment as a freshman, you know, with those big expectations that you had in your own mind?
Yeah, I remember walking in that first practice and coach asked us, he's like, "Okay, raise your hand if you're a state champ." And, pretty much like 90% of the room, hands up. Raise your hand if you're a runner up. And then all the other hands were up. So it was like everybody was good. Everyone,
Yeah.
was a stud from their home team. And, to come into that environment, it was humbling in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, I felt like I was learning how to wrestle from scratch all over again. Cause I'm in there and thinking, man, this used to be my best move. Now it's not working anymore. Now they're just shrugging it aside like it was nothing. And, that was discouraging. But, at the same time for me, I think in my head, I was never, I was never one to allow the challenge to become my excuse. And that became a slogan from my mom. Don't let your challenge become an excuse.
Mm.
So for me, every single time I hit a wall in that wrestling room and something didn't work, I would go back to the drawing board mentally and say, okay, what do I need to adjust here? What are they doing, that I need to figure out an answer for? Or what am I not doing? Where can I improve? And so it just became that uphill battle all over again. But that's what life is sometimes. It's just, you're climbing little by little and you're finding puzzle pieces along the way. And for me, uh, you know, I had to earn my teammates' respect. I felt like in some ways, like yeah, I had the resume back in high school, but so did everybody else. And for me,
Right.
this is a whole different level. D1, I was a walk on, and these guys would look at me when I first stepped in, like, okay, is this kid going to actually pan out? Is he going to make it through? Is he going to last? So every single workout coach would throw at us, whether it was in the wrestling room or on the track, carrying plates, lifting things, I made it a point to do every single thing that they did. I wanted them to know that I was going to be bleeding alongside them. I was going to be sweating. I was going to be crying. This was a team and I was a part of it. And everything they did, I'd be there with them.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, the movie does a great job of showing the resolve that you had to stick it out. What kind of influence were the coaches that you had, both at college and I know your high school coach was a huge influence on you?
Man, I love my coaches. First with my high school coach, Bobby Williams, he's really like a father figure to me, still is to this day. I still call and I'll text him for advice and, he's always there. And what I loved about Coach Williams is he treated me like I was a state champ or national champ as soon as I stepped through the door from the very first time. He was just willing to work with me, just willing to spend that extra time and effort. And, um, you know, I remember him just always focusing on the positive things. So in a lot of ways, it was just like my mom. If I'd walk off the mat angry about a loss, he'd say, well, it's like, you're doing really well on this, this, and this. He said, we need to still improve here, but this is what you're doing right. This is what's going well for you. So just that positive reinforcement, that calming force in my background was huge. And then my college coaches, I mean, I had a couple. I had Tom Ortiz. I had Brian Stith, who's an assistant, Sean Charles, and in their own ways, they were just highly motivating figures for me. They would push me, they would challenge me, they would call me out on my certain weak areas, and force me to look at those things and address them. And to be coachable. And so I call them my circle now. They're guys that I lean on, that I look to for
Mhm.
advice, just men that I respect. But I think that's what it's all about as well as in life and in sport, being coachable. Surrounding yourself with people that are going to call you out when you need it, and challenge you to be better and grow from that, and help you to level up. And those people did that for me. When the majority of the other coaches said no, said just overlook me, these guys said, okay, let's figure this out with you. We're along for the ride. Let's go.
The other crazy thing about that story when you get into college is, these obstacles you had to get through, right? I mean, learning in high school and then not getting a scholarship, walking on, then you get in Arizona, you start building everybody's respect and you start learning how to win at that level. And then the program gets canceled, right? I mean, because of funding. I mean, that is another struggle that you and your teammates faced.
I'll never forget that day. It completely came out of nowhere. I just remember getting that phone call, getting the notice saying AC was dropping the program. And I felt like just as everything was starting to go right, just as the hard work was starting to pay off, I was forming that bond with my team. I was making a name for myself, and then things get turned upside down, and that was heartbreaking. I felt lost, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. But, I think we were blessed because there were some people that stepped up to self endow the program temporarily, to give us an opportunity to stay at Arizona State. And it ended up being a great thing for me personally because that's when I received my wrestling scholarship after the program was brought back. But
Mhm.
I feel like life has a funny way of doing that to you sometimes. It's like everything's going well, and all of a sudden it turns the table over on you. But if you have that courage, just have faith and keep pushing and fighting. There's something even better waiting for you around that next corner. You just got to be able to push through that challenging time. And for us, we did lose a couple guys. But I feel like the team that stayed, it bonded us even closer. And I felt like uh, Sun Devil Wrestling, ASU Wrestling became. We kind of had a chip on our shoulder after that.
Mhm.
We had to show people that, hey, ASU Wrestling is still around. Hey, this is a place where we got some tough wrestlers, and take a look at us. So I felt like it bonded us in a way to where we are the underdogs. Not just
Yeah.
individually, but now as a team.
Yeah, you guys were unified from that point going forward, and then it starts clicking for you. I mean, as a junior, you did well. I think it was it the semis or the quarterfinals you lost in the national tournament?
Mhm.
You were pretty discouraged after that, despite getting all that success. Can you talk about that crossroads? Here's another crossroads, right? After your junior season doesn't end the way you want. You thought about quitting at that point, didn't you?
I did. I remember just losing at the NCAA tournament, and it was like 30 seconds left in the match where I lose. It was close,
Mm.
and you know, that match when it ended, I just remember hearing, my opponent's fans, they're screaming in the crowd, and I was shocked for a minute. Like it hadn't hit me just yet. And I walked to the back of the arena underneath the tunnel. I just remember just sliding behind a curtain, near a trash can, and I just started crying. It just broke me because it's like, man, you put everything you have into something. Like you do all the right things, you're showing up every day, everything you got, you just give it all, and you still fall up short. And I was dealing with some stuff off the mat with my family. We were in danger of losing our house, and my mom was struggling. And so just everything just felt like it was just crushing. It was a crushing weight on top of me. I didn't think I was going to come back. I walked away from that tournament, and I was just looking forward to, okay, how can I graduate early? How can I just get out of here? But I'm done competing. Didn't train that summer, stayed away from the wrestling room. And, uh, for me, it was just discouraging because it's like, yeah, I got one more year, I got one more opportunity, but it's like basically I have to put that on repeat, every single day, put everything I have,
Yeah.
I try to work harder than last year for maybe the opportunity to get to where I want to be and maybe be able to compete for a title. And I could still lose, and I didn't feel like I was ready to do that and ready to commit. And, I was ready to give up. But what ended up kind of turning me around mentally was one day I get a phone call from my coach, and he's like, "Hey, I need to see you. I got something for you." And so I meet up with him, and he hands me this box of letters, and it was from a group of third graders out in Atlanta. And they had read a wrestling article about me before the NCAA tournament happened, and now they're writing me as their hero of the week. And this was even after I lost at that tournament. And to be honest with you, that was the first time where I felt like my eyes were opened. For I was wrestling for something bigger than myself.
Mhm.
I think up until that point, I had gotten some opportunities for interviews and things like that. And it was an honor for me, but I kind of it felt like it was pressure, or at least that's what I viewed it as. I felt like I hadn't done anything yet. I hadn't earned that opportunity yet. And so, I had high expectations of myself, and they had high expectations of me. So I felt like a loser at this point, but these kids were like, no, you're not a loser. What makes you a hero to us is, you're just trying, you're just giving your best. And so that inspired me to say, you know what? This is bigger than just a gold medal. This is bigger than just a first place title. It's to show these kids that, life is all about giving your very best. It's not the result. It's just giving your best and knowing this is all I had. And whatever the result is, that's something to be celebrated. So my senior year, I came back for a bigger cause than myself.
Yeah, that part of your story is so awesome. It's the power of words, other people, encouragement, and your faith in there a little bit. I mean, I like to talk about faith a little bit. I mean, how much of relying on your faith helped you through that point, especially in that last year and coming back and going at it one more time?
My faith was the center of it all. That's always been a huge part of my life. And even then when the times where I felt like it wasn't, and I just felt like, doubting that God had a plan for me, because that's something that my mom always used to say growing up. She said, God has a plan for you. You just got to be faithful. You got to be patient. And, in that particular time of my life when, you know, I did get my heart broken, and I did hit rock bottom in my life, I was like, there's no plan for me. if there is a God up there, he's definitely not looking out for me right now. He doesn't really care about me. I'm on my own. But then, you know, at that critical moment, that's when I feel like he used those kids to touch me, to reach me.
Hmm.
When I closed myself off to everyone who was close to me, my coaches, my teammates, I didn't want to talk to them. I didn't go into the place where I thought was my home, the wrestling room. I stayed away. God used these kids to touch my heart and inspire me to come back and say, hey, there is a plan. It's just bigger than you think it is. It's not just what you're doing on a mat. It's outside. It's touching these people's lives, and those kids revealed that to me. So for anyone out there who's going through something dark, who feels like there's no plan for them, and they feel like they're hopeless and it's alone, you're not alone. You just have to have that courage to take one more step, and when you do that, take one more step after that, and before you know it, there's going to be something in your path that's going to help you through what you're going through right now.
Yeah, that's great. I think that part of your story, I mean, there's so many great parts, but that part with the letters and the kids and, perhaps it was God speaking to you through those kids, you gotta be looking for that guidance. You win the national championship. I mean, it all comes together, right? Um, did it feel as good as you thought it would feel?
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah, even better.
uh-huh.
In particular, there was one moment, there was, 10 seconds left in the match, an NCAA championship match. And I remember I was winning, and I can remember the official counting down right next to me, and the crowd getting louder and louder. And, when he got down to 0, there was a point where, they got it on video. I closed my eyes, I put my head down to the mat, and I just took a deep breath in. That was a moment that made it all worth it. It wasn't, being on the podium, holding the trophy up. It was just that moment right there to where, and I had wrestled for 3 days straight, against 5 of the top wrestlers in the country. So my body was beat up. I was tired. At that moment right there, didn't feel any pain. I wasn't tired. I just felt this indescribable sense of joy that I had made it there. And I remember thinking, man, this was all worth it. The ups and downs, the struggles, it was worth it for this moment right here. And that's what makes the toughest goals so special. It's the price that you have to pay. It's the pain that you have to endure to reach them. And that what's what makes it valuable to you. And so for me, it's like, man, at that point, it's like I would have done this 100 times over to get to this point.
That's great. The word unstoppable, okay, it's the name of your book, it's the name of the movie. That is I love that word for so many reasons. Was that your word? Did you use that, or is that just how you came, it's a great word to put on a book or a movie, but is that something or a mantra you had along the way?
It was actually, and so it was kind of neat. Along the way, every athlete has the way they pump themselves up, right? It's whether it's like listen to playlists or whatever. For me, I had my specific playlist, but before I went out to compete, so I'm pacing on my side of the mat, my opponent's on his side. There's a few minutes before we go out there and scrap. In my head, I would tell myself, I was like, he can't stop my takedowns, he can't stop my tilts, he can't stop my ball and chain. And so fast forward to later on, after these kids impacted my life, I knew from that point moving forward that I wanted to be a motivational speaker. And so, I was sitting down with my speaking coach. It was like an internship, and he's like, what theme do you want to talk about? He's like, you know, what do you want to focus on here? I was like, well, I want to talk about just wrestling through challenges in life. He's like, okay. He's like, well, we need like a word. He's like, are there any words that you use? How did you talk to yourself? It's like, well, when I compete, I'd say I can't. He can't stop this. My opponent can't stop that. He's like, so you're saying you're unstoppable? And that's where that word unstoppable came
Mhm.
from, was just my self-talk to myself, going through the battles that I had to go through on the wrestling mat and just saying, you know what, I'm going to find a way to win because this is the opportunity that I have. This is the strength. These are the strengths that I have in this moment. I'm unstoppable.
Yeah, so now you're speaking, you've got the book, the movie. I mean, do you realize there's this small percentage of people that have a movie made about their life, you know? I mean, you're in that club. What does that feel like?
And it's still very surreal, to be honest with you. And having a movie told about my life and just going through the process, it was exciting and terrifying. Because it's like, wow, they're gonna tell a movie of my life, but at the same time, it's like, man, it's not all the happy moments. It's the painful things, it's the struggles, it's the insecurities that the world's gonna see on a huge stage. And that was scary to me, and the reason why we really took our time, just moving forward with the project. And I wanted to make sure that we paired with the right group, the right team to
Uh-huh.
tell it, and who would really focus on the message behind it. And so, to have artist equity, to have Amazon and Ben Affleck and everyone who was involved, I remember just every single one of them told us, you know what, we're going to make you proud of this film. We're going to make you proud of how we share your story. And they are true to that. You know, I'm so happy with how the film turned out because I believe that it captured that message, which is what unstoppable is. You know, everyone wrestles through challenges, whether it's on a wrestling mat, whether it's something physical, it's off the mat. There's always going to be an opponent out there, you know. But I believe that this story, when people see it, they're going to be able to relate and say, you know what, I can be unstoppable too. So just so blessed for that opportunity. And to really have the experience of being on set every single day and work on the film was amazing.
That's such a unique life experience that you have, and, I watched the movie a couple of times, the second time with my daughter who's 15, and at the end, she said, "Is that really a true story?" And I said, "Yeah, it is a true story. That's the amazing thing about this." So, people can watch the movie, they can get your book, both called Unstoppable. You're on the speaking circuit, you're also coaching, you're a dad and husband, and you're doing so many great things with the gifts that have been given to you, Anthony. I just appreciate everything you're doing. And what's the next step for you? Final question. What's the next step for you continuing to impact people?
You know, for me, that's what it's all about now is impacting people. And, you know, I've been blessed to reach my goals physically that I wanted, wrestling wise, you know, pull up record wise. But now it's about giving back and helping that the next generation out. You know, the next unstoppable story that's coming out, and that's why I wanted to be a high school wrestling coach. You know, for my kids on the team specifically, I tell them we're chasing greatness, your greatness. You know, and to me, that's not measured by titles. It's not measured by your wins and losses. It's just measured by knowing day in and day out you gave your very best. And that's what I'm trying to teach them. Give your best in the wrestling room, give your best in class, give your best in your life. So for me, it's just giving back now. You know, I wouldn't be here today without those people in my life who helped me to reach this moment. So, you know, the way I say thank you and the way I just show them love is helping the next person reach their goal and wrestle through their challenge. So it's a day by day thing, but I'm just looking for those opportunities to do that, whether it's wrestling, whether it's just in my motivational speaking and, just trying to give back.
I love it. The great thing too is your story's timeless. I mean, it will apply forever. I think people will find inspiration from your story for many years. So thanks for taking this time to share it with us. We'll keep following you and cheering you on in what you do. Appreciate you being here, Anthony.
Honored for the opportunity. Thank you for speaking with me.
You bet.